Hendrix in 1983.
She has a bio?
This is what I'm finding on the webpage. In 1983, and an MFA from the University of Memphis in 1997. She's been at Hendrix for 22 years. Woo. I know Ann, we worked on the Explorations Working Group together. It was a magical time with Dr. Pesca. And so, welcome, Ann.
Thank you.
Yes.
To start with, Danny Grace has to leave. No. So, when I was a student here, I can't remember if it was Crowder or McCainch, but I turned in a paper once with a safety pin. Whoever it was, I'm sure it made their blood pressure. So I decided I would end that way as well. And thank you, JJ, and thank you all for being here. It's such a mess outside, and you're so nice for coming. I really, really appreciate it. Let's see. I brought a couple of props that I wasn't planning on, so I'll wait. But, you know, I don't really lecture. That's not really my thing, just maybe some in theater history. So it was always, for me, the best way to teach and to learn, because that sort of passive learning wasn't good for me, and I couldn't really relate to people in that way. Nothing wrong with lecturing. I'm not, you know, giving it a hard time. Jennifer, is it the up or the down?
Down.
Okay. Jennifer, as always, any PowerPoint that I've used that looks halfway decent has been constructed by Jennifer Pesky. You all don't think I quickly learned how to do PowerPoints. So, it's the nature of theater to be collaborative, and that's really the way that I work best. I don't work as well alone because of the give and take, which is an acting lesson, right? And there's Jonah right there, and Emily, I think you're there.
You're sitting in the back.
Sweet Todd.
We help the dirty.
Yes. And then what was important too for me, as well as I hope the students, is to listen and respond, right? Again, another acting lesson. Now, Derek actually gave me this little monkey, and some of you may have heard me say this, but I would tell the students, you know, there's this monkey on your shoulder that's telling you you're a mess up. I probably used different words. And I forgot to turn it on, didn't I? Sorry. And I just would tell them, you know, knock it off. Knock off that monkey. Don't listen to that monkey. And Derek Easton brought this to me, and he sewed up the mouth. Said, the monkey will no longer tell you you're a mess up, and that's Derek right there. So when thinking about doing this and moving out of my office, I had the opportunity to go through so many papers and books, so many books that Jim carried for me. Sorry, Dan. And I looked at some letters I'd written to Committee on Faculty for Reviews, and I was supposed to be reviewed this year, but I decided to retire. And then I also found my application from 22 years ago when I decided I'm going to give it a shot. And in it, it included teaching philosophy. And I'm pretty glad to report I was pretty consistent because my tenet was, as a teacher, I would be a facilitator, right? I create the space and give them stuff. This is really what we do in theater. And create the stuff, and then they do the work, right? And so it was nice to be able to see, yes, I've changed, and Lord knows I've gotten better, but it was still pretty much the way I looked at things. One of my best moments is always when the students are doing the work, right? By the end of the semester, it's their class, and they're running the show. And that was always the best part of it for me. Jennifer. Okay, no, it's all right. And so so my ideas about theater started when I was in Little Rock shortly after graduating from here. And with a group of people, we started a theater company. And the theater company was called Responda de Capita. And our fearless leader suggested the name, and I think he wanted to evoke the idea of the actor-audience relationship. Someone misinformed him, and I'm pretty sure it means nothing, but what he was headed for was the ability to respond, right? Whether or not the audience can respond to what's happening on stage, and also for those on stage to realize you have an effect, right? You have a power and a responsibility, give and take, right? And so about that time, I met someone named Becky Walensky, and she introduced me to Jerzy Grotowski. And Jerzy Grotowski was a wild and crazy Polish director, and should I just turn it on? No? Okay. Wild and crazy Polish director from the 1960s, and he started the Theater of 13 Rows. And he was also a theorist, and his main thing was poor theater. And his idea was that by stripping everything down from excess, you actually have a more honest relationship between actor and audience, right? And more meaningful. He called it the holy relationship. And I like that. I like the idea that it has that kind of meaning to it. All of this kind of began to form for me, and the idea that theater could be a good thing, that theater might do something worthy, right? It could benefit the community, it could benefit the individual, because the idea of theater or being an actor does not really always garner support, right? So if someone says, what do you do? And you say, oh, I'm an actor, or I want to be an actor, usually it's, oh, well, maybe you'll be on Broadway someday, right? Maybe you'll get to do it, or what have you done? Or are you moving to LA, right? When I tell people that I teach theater, they say, how fun, and it is. And then they say, do you have any students who have really made it, right? There's nothing wrong with this. All this is good, but it's not really what I wanted, you know? And really, I think I probably was too thin-skinned, because it's really hard to be in that industry. But I began to kind of think, okay, maybe theater can be something other than, I'm going to be famous, right? So the fact that it contributes to the growth of individuals, growth of community, really excited me. And when I got to graduate school, I met someone named Leslie Ferris. And she was a director and a scholar, and she got it. She got it when I told her what our theater had been doing, and she got it when I talked to her about what I wanted theater to be, right? And that I wasn't looking to be famous, you know? And she encouraged me to move in that direction. She was a director and a scholar, and she wrote about gender. And it was then that I realized that my interest was in how women were depicted on stage, right? Women playwrights who have been forgotten, marginalized. Women actors who never really got the kind of accolades really they deserved. I remember thinking really young one time, why is it when a woman cries on film, people roll their eyes, and when a man cries on film, it seems to have meaning, right? That always confused me. So all of these things started kind of gelling for me. And at the time, I wanted to also cast and cast against type, right? Not really look at, and Juliet must always be young and petite, right? That interests me, and that was where I was headed when I was doing my work. And the two major tenets for me when I left was the idea of the actor-audience relationship and how important it was for me that the audience wasn't just, there to be fed and then leave, right? And also the idea of women, and then it grew into those people who are marginalized, right? The people who don't have the power. I used to play a game in directing called Who's Got the Power? Some of you might know that little song. Who in the scene has the power? And how do we find the passive character, right? And give that passive character more action, right? Make them active, make them more powerful. So kind of turning things on their head to see what you get, right? So by the time I reached Hendrix, I graduated in 1983, and I was not a theater major. I did 2 little 1 acts, and I was in Dr. Hindenburg's acting class. That's all I did. I think my major ended up being in religion. So by the time I reached here, those were the things that excited me. And I had been adjuncting at 3 schools around. Danny, one time you said it's like you're a circuit rider because I was going in so many different places. And I thought a lot about teaching, and I was pretty good at what I was doing. But man, oh man, when I got to Hendrix, it was really different, right? Full time, it was really, really hard. But fortunately, I had Danny and Eric Benny and Rosemary Hindenburg and Carol Herrick, who all really sort of tolerated me and kind of helped me, nudge me in different directions of how I might be able to be a better teacher, and also just by learning from what they did. There was also a group called Explorations that JJ mentioned, and JJ and Jennifer and I had the chance to lead it. And that was like a professional development. We'd meet in the summer and you had all of these people there, Joyce, Carol Herrick, Joe Lombardi, Richard Raleigh, Lyle Rupert. I mean, all of these people who'd been teaching forever. And I got to listen and hear ideas about teaching and how they would go about it. And I remember one time I must have been after my second year, and I sort of confessed how terrible a class had been, and that the students weren't doing any of the work, and they weren't listening to me. And I think it was Lombardi that said something like, "Yeah, no kidding." And I thought, oh my gosh, it's not just me, right? It's not just me that they don't think have a good thing to say. Another instance like that came when I visited with Mark Shantz. Some of you in the room know Mark. And I had a really bad class, and he was up here in the social science. And I walked to his office, and I said, "God, I feel like such a fraud." And he said, "Don't we all?" So all of those things, people here at Hendrix who are willing not to play games, who are really willing to be able to confess, yeah, I'm not perfect, I don't do everything right, and the students do misbehave in my class. I don't think I would have had that everywhere, right? And so that was a big part of my growing up and my growing into maybe being able to teach. Sorry. So, by the time, I think it was my second year I was here, one of my professional organizations sent this in the mail, and it was on my door for 22 years. Can you tell? And it really made a lot of sense to me. It's Thornton Wilder. I regard theater as the greatest of art forms, the most immediate way in which a human being can share with another the sense of what it is to be a human being. Right? Not famous on Broadway winning awards, but it's meaningful for everyone. And I think that, again, here at Hendrix, I was able to kind of grow into that kind of teacher. And also with Danny, with Connie, working with me in production, I was able to really grow as an artist, right? Because we had such a great collaboration, I think. We were able to help one another, right? And then I think, hopefully, help the students as well. It wouldn't have happened. And I was able to really begin to understand what it meant, teaching and teaching toward the whole person, right? So, this is from a poster in my office. Risk, fail, risk again, right? Again, it came from one of the organizations. I really love teaching. I love teaching acting. I love teaching directing. I especially love teaching acting, right? Every year it just became my respite because I'd have about 18 or 20 students and we'd create this little company and they were able to support one another. It wasn't competitive. The really great thing too is that the students in the class were not always theater majors. I love you all, but they were also, pre-med. We had several physics folks who would come over, act, and then also work in the light booth. And it was really special because maybe someone had never been on stage before. So I get to see that person take the risk of even getting up there, as well as those folks who had been acting for a while, take the risk of trying to get better, right? So when I tell the students, take a risk, you may fail, take a risk. I don't think they love it, but eventually I think that they'll see you kind of have to fail to eventually get it right. And in order to get it right, you have to take a risk, right? And so it's a bit of a turn on one of Samuel Beckett's lines. Try again, fail better. It's from Wordsworth Hoe, which is a short story. And folks kind of think that this is maybe a downer, that he's kind of a depressing playwright. I actually think he's just one of the playwrights that speaks to the human condition, probably more than, right? I can't say that. Why do I even start to say that? He speaks to the human condition as opposed to how dismal life is. You try something, it doesn't work. You try it again, and maybe it'll be a little bit better, right? Isn't that kind of learning? It is actually from, here's the whole quotation. Ever tried, ever failed? No matter, try again. Fail again, and fail better, right? Keep going. Put one foot in front of the other. Keep the bicycle going. The poster was from the Eugene O'Neill Theater, by the way. So a thing happens, I think, and Stanislavski talks about this, in experiencing art and then, oh Lord, I just lost it. Experiencing art and then, not realism, but something else, I'll come back to it. But in experiencing, it's in the rehearsal, right? And it's just between the actors. But when you bring it to an audience, it then becomes something else. It grows. It doesn't get worse, it grows, right? And it changes. So when we have actors on stage, and I know this sounds, loosey-goosey, but the actors kind of share that energy with one another. And then that energy should go to the audience, and then it should come back to the actors. So each time they perform on stage, something's different, right? That's what we have on film. Film can't do that. We've got people in the same room breathing the same air, right? And so we have a structure that we put together, right? When we put our tech nights and our rehearsals and all those things. But when we get with an audience, the weight of the audience begins to change things. And every night there's something new that happens. I think that's terrific, right? It's terrific because you have something to rely on, something that's important, that has the structure, but then you're willing to let other people come in and let other people respond to you. I got that from Stanislavski. I think it's important. It requires imagination, yes. One of my favorite things was when we did children's plays and we'd invite schools to come in. David helped us do that. The first time, I think it was Reed's class, right? And the first time we had these photos and David was welcoming them in and realized that there was a nude on the wall. So he was standing up against the wall like this. And like, what are you doing? But we're able to continue to do that. And it was so great to see such spontaneity and enjoyment and joy in the audience, and then to see the students, the Hendrix students, see that and respond to it, right? There's nothing better. I mean, it was really special. And I think it creates a kind of empathy, or at least empathy, I'll say. And there's a study, Jennifer, I've forgotten the name of it now. The University of Arkansas did one, and then Jennifer found one for me from Cambridge and UCLA, in which they were able to see that people who came to see plays and then left were able to essentially be kinder, right? Have a greater understanding for other people, develop more empathy. There's also cognitive stuff that happens too. But I think that's pretty wonderful and really powerful, right? So, Sarah Donaghy, who was, we had, at a time we had Rondon students here, and Sarah was the organizer of those students. And she came to me and asked me if I might be interested in doing some kind of a project with them. We had one student who was from Rwanda, but they told me to say Rwanda, and said, could we do something? Could we do something with the students? They were always on campus in the summer because they worked in the labs. And Sarah said that what she was seeing was that the students were kind of isolated and that it was causing depression. So our hunch was this would be good for them, but also what we asked them to do is come together, we will create a performance, and it will be for the next cohort that comes in. So in August, I think about 40 came in, and they were here for about a week, and then went to other schools, and maybe 3 or 4 stayed here. So because they worked all day, we met at night in the green room. And I initially gave them some, voice recorders. But they didn't have any time because they worked all day, and then they were coming at night. And I asked them to journal, and some folks journal, but again, not a lot of time, right? So what I ended up doing was just having, we had supper, pizza or something, and having conversations with them. And as it turned out, a lot of them didn't know where they were from. The other person was from in Rwanda, and there are so many different areas of Rwanda. So they talked talked to one another and told them about where they were and what was special about it and all these things. And then I realized, actually, I need to ask, just tell me about it. Just tell me about it. Don't assume I know anything. And they began to teach me about their lives in Rwanda. And I have a good short-term memory because I waited tables. So I would write, shoot. So I would write, and then I would remember a lot of things, and I would take notes. And we began putting things together. And I wrote a script for them. When the cohort came, we performed, and the idea was, what is it you wish you had known? What is it you wish somebody would have told you? And when someone asks, where are you from, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing. It means you're really curious and want to know where you're from, right? So it was terrific. It was just one of the most meaningful experiences I'd had. And there were some who were really good actors, but they weren't actors, right? They were all scientists. And it was, then I realized, I think I'm kind of going in a direction that I like, right? I'm starting to see things that I might like to do. And there are lots of playwrights who create work from interviews. I'm especially attracted to Tectonic Theater Company, but tons of, I'm not original. So I realized that was kind of an interview. Odyssey supported it, by the way, and it was terrific. So, then again in 2018, I realized that I wanted to get out of the bubble. And I'd always been interested in working with women who were incarcerated. So I had a friend, and she sent me a list of all these organizations who worked with women who are incarcerated or formerly, and she sent me all the emails. I wrote out all the emails, sent them to all. One person responded, Kim Roxburgh, and she worked with Hope Rises. And Hope Rises is a re-entry program. So they're not on parole, they're still in prison, but they lived in this huge old Victorian house in East Little Rock. And it was a gender-specific program so that the women received counseling for trauma, received counseling for recovery, helped them get their driver's license, helped them get Social Security cards, helped them learn how to find a job. And it was amazing, really amazing. And so I called a friend, Wayne Chapman, and I said, hey, I think this would be cool. And he was a theater professor at UALR for a long time and had retired by then. And he said, okay, well, what are we going to do? And I said, I don't know, but we're going to see, right? So we went to Hope Rises, I think, once a week on Sundays, and we talked to the women. It was cool because they had to do one thing that was artistic every week. And so this began to be one of the artistic things, right? And they wrote, they journaled for me, we interviewed them, and then we had group discussions. And it was eye-opening, to say the least, right? It was, I didn't realize how much I didn't know and how really fortunate I was, and how I had a good friend once who used to say, the only difference between us and the guy on the street is that we can go home. And I actually think that that might be true. We could go home to our parents or our friends or whatever. So it was terrific. Well, we weren't able to get anything going, but then that summer they had a new cohort come in We started going again. We interviewed them. We had group discussions, and I put together a little script. And Holly Payne arranged for us to be able to use the vault for free, which is part of the rep. And we filled the house. It was really amazing. It was, again, it began to be one of the most meaningful things I think I had ever done. And we did it on a shoestring. I mean, Wayne and I paid for everything. There was no support. The rep gave it to us for free and all that. So in that post-production, we had dinner. They invited us to dinner, and we had a post-production that became kind of an assessment. And they were all really excited and really happy. And one kept saying, it was just so great, it was just so wonderful. And I finally asked the question, what do you mean? What was wonderful about it? And one woman said, it gave me confidence. And I said, why? And she said, because being in front of an audience as myself and offering myself to the community as is honest. And they weren't taking on a character, right? They were really telling some of their experience. And another said, I felt like they really saw me and they cared. And I felt really silly. I mean, this was something I wanted to do. I thought it would be cool, but then it had such an impact. And Kim said that of all the creative programs that had been a part of her work with the women, this programming had more impact and demonstrated clearer results than any other to date. So Pete Guess and I think Jay Barr said, why don't you apply for an Odyssey professorship and see if you can do that? And so I did, and I got it. And that next year, we had a plan, and 3 students worked with me along with Wayne. We met, I want to say 2 or 3 nights a week at First Methodist Church downtown. And we recorded and interviewed, and we recorded the group discussion. And then from that, this was a whole new cohort because they graduate every 6 months. And after that, then we put on 2 more shows and had fundraisers. And it was really just, I mean, I felt like this is it, right? Working with these students, the students loved it. They were just amazing. It was like, this is it, right? And then came 2020. And COVID hit, and the prisons were closed. And because this was considered a prison, and I couldn't go. That summer, some students and I interviewed some of the women who had graduated, but we'd never be able to do anything, you know? It just wasn't going to happen. So that was a little bit of a down. But from that, I also applied for a Pericles grant, and the Pericles grant is a civic. I don't even know what time.
You're good. 2:35. You're good.
And so Jay Barr said you could also do this. So I created a class called Theater and Social Justice. You 2 were in the first. You 2 were in the second and last. And in it, the idea was that the students interview public servants and then create scenes based on the interviews with them. And my hunch was public servants are not normal. They do things that we don't, right? They put themselves in harm's way, whether it's physically, right? Or whether it's emotionally. They put their families, you know, at risk in some ways. In other words, they run toward the fire, right? And I find that really interesting. And I think the students did. We had some really, really fantastic results from it. And taught the class about 4 times. And so today, this semester, I'm on sabbatical. And my project is to started out to interview firefighters. A little bit hard to get as many. I have 2 captains and one of our students who's a volunteer firefighter. And I've interviewed 2 trauma response healthcare professionals who work with children, an FBI retired dude, and then I have another law enforcement guy. And hopefully, in June, we'll be able to do some kind of performance based on what I get from that. And that is kind of what I'm hoping I'll be able to move forward with in retirement. It's a really, really rewarding experience. And I think my hunch for it, not only that they're not normal, but also that the community just doesn't really know folks unless they're your neighbors, you know? And one time, something happened in our neighborhood. I can't remember what it was. May have been your burglar, I can't remember. And police officers came and they were checking in on everybody. And then later, some neighbors and I were talking and we were like, they were so nice. They were just so nice and so professional. And I thought, well, what did I expect, right? What truly did I expect to happen? They were checking to see if I was okay. So that was kind of embarrassing. And I felt like it was worth maybe figuring it out for myself, and maybe it would be useful for the community at large. And the students taught me a lot about, with their interviews, and about how we can change. Sid, I remember, I think you said, now when I see a fire truck, I think maybe, I can't remember his name, is on it.
But yeah, that was one thing that I took from that, absolutely, was like, I'm having personal thoughts of like, I hope they are okay, more so like, it gave me a personal connection to it.
And it was, yeah, so that was kind of what I was hoping for. So, here's my last, I think. And again, I think this is a positive note, right? That idea of, well, I gotta take the next step, and no, I don't really want to, I can't do it, and then, all right, I'll do it, right? Not everybody can jump up and say, it's great, we're gonna do it. So that's it, that's all I got. I have 3 students who are still in here now, which is awesome, and some alums too. Is there anything, questions or anything you want to comment on? Hey, Jose.
I just want to say thank you for being such a great colleague over the years, and giving always so positive and constructive comments in the assembly.
Thank you, Jose.
We came at the same time.
We were in the same little cohort, yeah.
And we were teaching in the AC summer school.
Yep.
And I was teaching from the classroom, and there was something projected on a screen, and it got a nail in my front of loser. And then we have to talk about what were the situations that would distract the attention of the students. And I told Ann, what are the chances I would get another L in my forehead? And then we couldn't stop laughing the whole summer.
It was, John Arms, I think it was my first asthma attack. I could not stop laughing. It was so funny. Yeah. And in fact, John and Diana is actually the reason I ever got to Hendrix. Because my best friend was here, and she wanted me to come here. I was in Fayetteville. And John was Ramona's advisor, and he said, well, tell her to come down and come talk to me. And I wasn't the best student in the world. Ramona was, but I wasn't. And I was like, I don't think anything gonna take me. And I visited with John, And then he was like, well, here, why don't you, and I think I filled out the application, and Diana came over, and I left, and I was like, I think I just applied and maybe was admitted. Am I lying? That's pretty much what happened, right? So really, had it not been for John listening to his student and saying, why don't you have your friend come down, I wouldn't be here. Thank you.
And what was it like to come back to Hendrix as a professor after, from having been a student? What was like the craziest or weirdest sort of experience that you had?
I called Dr. Chappell, and he turned around, not very nicely, and said, my colleagues call me Chuck. Okay. I remember being completely humiliated seeing Dr. Larson and Dr. McCain because I wasn't the best student. And I kept thinking they would say, oh man, why did you get here? Right? So it was good. I mean, it was very positive. I didn't know Danny before we started working together here, so that was kind of different. And I mean, it was what I thought it would be. A Hendrix student is a Hendrix student, you know? Curious, creative, sensitive, caring, smart, a little crazy. Yeah. So that was good. It was a good thing. And scary. Yeah. Anything else?
Hey, Ann.
Yeah.
Hey. I'm Terry Thomas. Someone here for my 40th this weekend in the theater. Hi to Danny Gray. Can you tell me how you have seen the theater department here change over the years? Because we were contemporaries back in the 80s and...
Yeah, so I wasn't, like I said, I wasn't a theater major, but I did hang out with a lot of folks. And, I mean, Frank was the Danny, and Frank was a great artist, but not always very organized. Am I right? Yeah. And so there was always kind of that, it felt like kind of a lesson, you know, that falling off the cliff. What I saw with Danny, who is a great artist, but also brought a lot of the structure and professionalism into what was done. And again, forgive me, Frank, I'm sorry, but I do think that that was something that happened. And then when we were working together, I think we kind of increased that in a good way. Not that the other's bad. We did a lot more shows. A lot more shows in the year. It was semester instead of trimester. What else, Dan?
I did a lot of shows.
We did a lot.
Started the dance department.
Started the dance department. Danny and Bridget started that whole curriculum. Yeah. I found the ground plan for the directing class when the directing class I would make them work over in Staples.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And Danny, it was really funny because I'd say, so this is what I'm going to do with my directing class. We're going to do Chekhov over on Staples, da-da-da. And he'd go, okay. And then the next thing he'd go, well, what are you going to do? Where are you going to put the chairs? And I'm like, oh, there's just put the chairs. Next thing I know, I've got a ground plan, and he's got platforms for the chairs, and there's a playing space, and we've got lights. I think you felt obligated to do it. But yeah, a lot. We did a lot, which is fantastic. Really fantastic.
What was your favorite production, and then what was your most challenging production?
I think Sweeney Todd almost killed me.
Sweeney Todd almost killed all of us, Ann.
I mean, I'm not a musician, I'm not a musical person, and we just said, why not? And then Jonah turned up a freshman and could sing it.
They got the Mark Benz.
Exactly, Mark Benz. So that was very rewarding, but very, very hard. I don't know that I have a favorite, honestly, because when I look at the pictures, I think of, you know, the student or the experience, or I love doing the children's plays, and I was able to kind of write them and work with the students to create them, and I really love doing that. Working with Bridget especially, yeah. Yeah?
So,
Yeah.
And I love that you quoted Carol Churchill and Beckett in your lecture. And thanks to you, I looked into Susan Glasgow of Trifles. So I was wondering if there were other playwrights or the work of others that you'd like to leave us with, like,
Yeah.
or some more that whose work needs attention from you.
Oh, Bridget, what did I do?
Push that little
Oh,
screen
right,
button
right.
again and get it back.
Yeah, in fact, this was a great,
Go back and
I know. See? Did I miss it? No. This was He and She by Rachel Carruthers. And it's really crazy. My acting group just read this too. She produced so many plays in New York, on Broadway, terribly successful, actor, playwright, but we don't know about them, right? I got to teach women writing for the stage or last year, I guess, and we read all of these plays that you just don't know about, right? But this was a lot of fun, and I wish I had a better shot. Danny's set was just lovely. It was beautiful, really beautiful.
Carruthers, what's the last name?
Rachel Carruthers.
Thank you.
Susan and God is probably her more famous, but this is really good.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We have time for one more question.
What are you looking most forward to about retirement?
Jim keeps telling me we're going to have a lot of fun. So that I'm looking forward to, and maybe sleep.
Yeah.
Good answer.
Yeah. And truly, hopefully doing some of those projects.
Of course.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, we got you a little something. Guess what it is? It's a James Hayes bowl. It's wrapped in wraps, so.
Okay, I can't look at it.
You can look at
What
it.
if people don't know it?
James Hayes is a graduate of Hendrix, and he makes these beautiful glass bowls that we have in the Spirit Store if you'd like to purchase one for yourself. But it is a gift that we often give one another on campus in our times of retirement or leaving the college. So.
That's big. Oh, and it's not just orange and black.
Yeah.